I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here with Dr. Iris Freelander, and today we'd like to talk to you about thought images. In New Thought metaphysical philosophy, we say so often that we live in our minds and not in the world, and by that we mean that those things that take place in our thought processes determine how it is we view the world and how it is we feel about the experiences that we're having. One of the things that is very fundamental to our faith tradition is the belief and understanding that thoughts make things. That's something that I think a lot of people don't really think a lot about, isn't it?
People don't think a lot about that, and some people discredit it, but we know in all the various religions that what you think. And there used to be a Victor H. Lindlar says, you are what you eat, but they've all said you are what you think. And so the creative visualization is a part of almost every religion. Wouldn't you say so?
It is. And of course, the power of thought and the creative imagery of thought is in today's environment becoming so much a part not only of religious and spiritual people, but also in psychological and educational and business circles. And I'm just thinking about the kinds of groups that use guided imagery and other ways of using thought to either calm people or to stimulate within people their own creativity.
Yes, and so many doctors have used visualization in healing very successfully. And Dr. Simonton is one that is probably the most well-known. And he has healed numerous patients, and so have lots of other doctors, and so have the alternative health doctors helped people with healing. And I think that I've had healing of my own through visualization, and just putting my hands here and saying, the bone structure of my mouth is whole and strong. And I had a terrible pain from cold water being in my mouth, like rinsing my mouth with cold water and so forth, and in my water pick. But then within about 4 or 5 days, there was no pain at all, no discomfort at all from the cold water. And that's the most recent one. But I've seen it happen in many cases personally, where visualization has worked, because we know that that's the law of nature. It's not our laws, it's God's laws. And so we can visualize and create. Visualize, create. And so I would encourage everyone who hears us to try that and see what happens.
We have a song that we sing at the fellowship, and that's a part of the unity tradition, which says, words and thoughts have molding power. And so often when we listen to the words that we speak, or if we are conscious of the thoughts that we think, we're able to get a snapshot of what our life is like. And for so many people, life is filled with confusion, or filled with fear, or filled with concern. And of course, what we're about is helping people deal with the realities of daily living. And in every one of our lives, we're going to have calm and peaceful times, but we're going to have difficult and challenging times. And a lot of our difficult and challenging times are complicated by the dynamic of how our mind operates. I'm thinking now of people that have come to us in counseling so often for depression, or for other kinds of experiences that have created challenges and hurts and pains in their life. And I'm thinking about the fact that so often they come with a confused thought process, and that confusion of mind just adds to the dynamic of the suffering that they're having from the experience. And one of the things that I think we can talk a little bit about is that we believe so often that the experiences in our lives are really determining how our life is going, but it's not the experience. It's not what happens in our life that really determines the quality of our life. It is our response to what happens. If we lose a job, for instance, which is a traumatic situation, and of course in today's environment, we see a lot of people who do lose their jobs. And so if an individual loses his or her job, that's a traumatic experience, and so often we feel that experience is going to be the driver in determining how our life is going to be lived out and how we feel. But in fact, it's up to us to respond and to be aware of how it is our mind dynamic is dealing with that situation or the circumstance of the lost job. Because when we lose a job, what of course we know is that there are more jobs to be had. And so if we're able to deal with the immediate situation, if we're able to center ourselves in the presence of where we are and to realize that we have lost our job, this is the circumstance and situation, and now if in our mind we can move through a natural process of dealing with this loss of job, then we can move into the dynamic action of doing something else. And of course the something else is we either are going to take a break if we can afford to do that, or we're going to be about the business of finding another job. Another experience that most people can relate to is not having enough money. You know, most of us from time to time just don't have enough money. The bills outweigh the inflow of our cash from time to time. And so often we look at the checkbook and it's empty, or we look at our wallet or our bank account and say we don't have enough money, and we immediately begin to become panic-stricken about the fact that we don't have enough money, where in fact what's happening is that there is indeed the cash shortfall. That's a reality. But that cash shortfall is a dynamic of mind, and now the way that our minds operate to deal with that situation will determine the quality of life and how we deal with that problem. And the problem immediately becomes an opportunity to do something differently in our lives and to seek a solution. And the solution, of course, is to create more cash. And in order to create more cash, we need to perhaps get another job, do something differently, cut our expenses. There are a variety of things that we can do. And it's important for us to always remember that if our minds are operating from a center of peace and understanding, that every circumstance and situation can be dealt with. Now, there are traumatic situations like death and serious illness and devastating experiences that are going to bring us into a process of grief, and we understand that. And so we have to go through the thought process that we would normally go through depending upon the severity of the situation. But we need to really understand that the way that we think about things determines the quality of our life and the quality of the impact that experiences have upon our life.
Yes, and when we do and think things through very clearly, then usually we get a better job, or we can see that what happened was a blessing in disguise. And haven't you heard many people say that? Oh, that was devastating in the beginning, but it was a blessing in disguise. And it's according to, I believe, the way people react to the problems of their lives. They can react in a very negative way and chaotic, or if they're positive and just keep going in a positive way, then it comes out that way. I was thinking earlier about a lady I know who used to say she had several children, and she used to say, I can feel it in my bones, or it's something about, she was always talking about her bones being affected by her children, just the normal rearing of her children. But that was what she would say. And she developed multiple myeloma, cancer of the bone marrow. And I've given a lot of thought to that since that lady had developed that dread disease. Another person I know would say, that person is a pain in the neck. And they were always saying so-and-so is a pain in the neck, and they developed a very critical pain in their neck. So we can, if we look, all of us, at the people around us and see if they've had things that they say a great deal that they affirm, then yes, it does happen. And of course, those in our church and in many churches, they teach the power of affirmation. So when we affirm, then we know that if we affirm one way it works, then it will also affirm, if we affirm the other way, that works too. So we need to be very careful of that which we speak, don't we?
We do. We need to be careful of that which we speak, and we need to be careful of that which we think, because both thoughts and words have creative power. And as we speak the words that come from our thoughts, we do create the environment of our life so often. And we're able to deal with our lives in the same way. And that creative power of thought is something that I think in many cases minimize. And a lot of times, of course, we get into this issue of trying to analyze our thoughts and understand. If we get sick, we'll say, well, what did I think to bring this on? And sometimes there's not a thought that brought it on, but there is a thought that takes us through the experience of the illness. There is a thought that takes us through every day of our life. And whether we think in a positive way or we think in a negative way determines to a huge extent whether or not we're going to be a happy person or a depressed and sad person, whether we're going to allow the circumstances of life to determine and throw us from one side to the other, or whether we're going to take control of our lives through the awareness that our thoughts do indeed create things, and through the imagery of our mind we can change the circumstances and situations, not necessarily the external circumstance, but the way that it impacts us and the way that we respond to it. And we can all think of people whom we know who are able to just deal with all of life's challenges in the most positive and affirmative way. And then other people who the least little thing will just devastate them. And it all has to do with the way that their minds are operating, the way that they're thinking about life, and also the way that they're thinking about their relationship with other people and the way that they're thinking about their relationship with God or the divine or whatever spiritual principle or faith tradition they have grown up in and they practice.
Yes, and it shows on people's face how they face the challenges of life. And I think you've been a very great inspiration for me these many years that I've known you, and you've helped me to stay more centered and to accept whatever has happened in my life. And I think that that's residual in a very great sense. And it's also according to our proclivity throughout life as to how we've graded things. There's a lady I know who does astrology work very well, and someone said to her, I think that Iris must never have had any problems in her life. And she hadn't thought about that. She's also my friend. So, but the lady who said that was not someone who knew me. And so she said, I didn't give it much thought until then. And I realized that you have had a lot of troubles in your life. You've had a lot of problems in your life, and you've faced great adversity, greater than the average person. And as you know, I have had great adversity in my life. And so it shows in our faces. It shows when we allow things to get us down and when we don't. And it doesn't mean that we don't care when things terrible happen to ourselves in our own lives or in the lives of others. It means that if we live what we teach and what we think, then we can see the ramifications in a different way than just doom and gloom. And then we can therefore not be touched by it as deeply. Now, that's not a simplistic thing to do, is it?
No, it is something that's learned, and it is something that is developed over a period of time. And there are people, of course, who come from families and backgrounds and support systems that have stronger, positive, affirmative realities of life and life experience, and there are those who come from very negative backgrounds and experiences and support systems. And so we do come from different places, but whether we come from a positive environment or a negative environment, we can always change the way that we think, and we can always change the way that we view life. And the way that we view life is always beginning and ending in our minds.
And as you said earlier, it's determined by how we grow from that. It is determined by the way we accept what happens in our lives. That yes, this has happened. Now what do we do? And we go on in a positive way without fighting. And I think it's the resisting that makes a big difference too. When we resist adversity rather than accepting it and go in a different direction, then that has a more negative effect.
Absolutely. And that resistance to life's challenges, it isn't that we need to resist or avoid problems, it's that we need to confront them. And of course, one of the things we talk about is even welcoming them, because if we can get to a point in our lives where we're able to say to adversity and difficulty, or say in the face of adversity and difficulty, this is where I am, and now I know that I will be guided and directed. I know that I will be able to deal with this situation no matter what happens. That is really the kind of empowerment and the strength that we talk about in our work and in our counseling work and in the fellowship. And this is a good point for us to stop at this point in the program and offer you the opportunity to receive some literature so that you can continue to study the ideas and concepts that we're sharing with you today.
We would like to offer you the opportunity to receive one of these free booklets to further your understanding of the New Thought message of confident living. Each month, we will feature a different booklet, which will be mailed to you free and postage paid. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807.
I think we can begin by talking in this last section, last half of the program, about ways in which people can change their negative thought patterns. And I think the first thing, of course, I guess that we should probably talk about is we need to look at ourselves and look at the way that we think, look at a little introspection or self-examination. And if we're an individual who tends to see things in a negative way, then we need to be alert to the fact that maybe we need to open ourselves to a new way of thinking.
Yes, indeed. And the people who say, "Why me, Lord, why me?" Well, they don't deal with life in the most positive way. So instead of saying, "Why me?" we can just look to the future and see what now instead of that. And we can always think in a positive way about the future and know that God is good and God is with us. It wouldn't matter what our religion is, or if we don't even profess to have a religion, we know there is a higher power. And so we know that that higher power is capable of guiding us, and we just need to align ourselves and our own energies with that great divine energy. And so when we do, then we're more accepting of life's problems and understanding of life's problems and knowing that nothing ever stays the same. And it's only through change that a good comes, because if it stayed static, if anything in life stayed static, then there wouldn't be anything. It's like the man who wanted everything he touched turned to gold, and then it did turn to gold, and that's all he had was gold. Well, that wouldn't help anyone at all. So we just need to keep our perspective and know there is a divine power, and know that what we think is what we pray, and as we pray, so it becomes, so it is. And so to guard against praying negatively, and to be trusting. And those would be two of the primary things. And of course, you and I talk about meditation, because we know that meditation centers us in the divine light and helps us to grow and understand and accept. And so that would be an additional thing. So it's keeping a positive attitude about anything that comes into our life, to pray in a positive way, and when we meditate, to be open to divine inflow.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And those are simple techniques that anyone can employ. And you touched on something that's really important. And I think from the standpoint of prayer, and one of the things we say about prayer is that our thoughts are prayers, and we're praying always.
Yes.
So as we're sending out the energy of our thoughts, we are praying, and we're thinking about ourselves, and we're thinking about others. And so often we think about prayer as that time we get down on our knees and or go to church. But in fact, we're in communion with the divine always. We're in communion with the universe always. And so our thoughts are going out, and we know that our thoughts are going out in the form of energy, and our thoughts go out from us and come back to us. And that outflow and that inflow is a natural process of life. And that's exactly why we see people who are serene, and people who are able to cope in a very positive way are just able to do more and more. And seemingly people who are burdened are more and more burdened, because thoughts create after their kind, and our lives are made manifest after the thought process, or in kind with the thought process. And so it is really important that we be really aware of how it is we're thinking. And then this idea of centering ourselves, and of course that's new for a lot of people in the Western tradition. In Eastern faith traditions, it's very common. Meditation is very common, but a simple exercise that we all know is what we learned as children when we were angry and our parents told us, or someone told us, stop and count to 10, or take a few deep breaths. And of course, that's a wonderful thing. If negativity creeps into our lives, take a few deep breaths. If a real problem comes and our minds are beginning to swirl in confusion, take a few deep breaths and begin to withdraw from that negative thought process. And the other thing is, if we're surrounded by people who are negative and we find ourselves susceptible to that negativity, then for heaven's sake, stay away from those people as much as we can. And of course, in some cases, we're in work environments or we're in family or relationships where we're surrounded by negativity. And we're not at all saying abandon your relationship or quit your job, because there are positive things that we can do to improve our relationships and our work environment and our home environment through the changing of our own mind dynamic. And as we change our way of thinking, as we become more peaceful, as we become more centered, as we become more positive, and as we become more hopeful and more expectant of the abilities that we have, we open ourselves to a magnificent newness of life. And we can do that at any point in our lives, no matter how devastating the circumstance or situation or how superficial it is.
Exactly. And when we're with people who are negative, very often people don't realize how negative they truly are. So instead of being critical and telling them, you're really out in left field, we can encourage them and inspire them to change their habits. And I know that you've seen that happen, and I have too, where people can change and will when they realize what they're doing to their own lives. So we could always just keep that in mind. That would be a pointer that we could make, that to try and inspire the people around us to lead more positive lives. And there's many ways that can be done.
Just simply thinking in a positive or affirmative way about another person, sending that positive vibration or strength to them is a process of mind, and it is a thought image. And if we see people as they truly are, then we're able to send to them their highest and their best. And what we need to do is always to be able to see beyond the appearances of life. When people misbehave, when people say things, when people do things that we know are not right, it isn't an issue of judgment. It isn't an issue. It isn't a time to begin the process of our mind of condemnation, but instead to send and to have within ourselves a positive and affirmative view of the reality and the truth of who they are despite the appearance.
Exactly. And I know a lady who used to pride herself on saying, she would worry about everyone, particularly her family members, and worry about world conditions, and she was always worrying. And one time her father said to her, when you worry like that, it shows lack of faith in God. And she said, but he didn't say it hatefully, he said it very lovingly. And she said, I didn't think of it that way. And she gave it some thought. And she changed. She changed immeasurably. And so when we do point things out to others in a loving way, it might really be life-changing for them. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves, too, in that same fashion, don't we?
We do. We absolutely do. And before time gets away, we need to always also touch on the fact that our thought images can have an impact. And of course, we talk about mind-body-spirit connection and that importance of us being triune people, which we are. And our thoughts can bring upon us illness. And we know about what stress and negativity can do, and we know about its impact upon elevating heart disease and ulcers and a variety of other illnesses that come about because of the negative thought processes. And so as we have these negative thought images of life, and as we have long periods of confusion and depression and all of the negative emotions that visit us from time to time, if we're not able to cope with them, there are physical consequences. And we do want to say that those who have really clinical depression and long-term depression, they always need to seek professional help. And so we're not ever talking about people trying to deal with life on their own. We all need support systems. We need to reach out to clergy, friends, to professional counselors. We need to get the help that we need in order to align our thoughts and our thinking so that our minds are operating in a positive and affirmative way. And the other thing is we want to caution people against denying their feelings. We don't ever want that to happen. You feel the way that you feel, and that's perfectly justified. If you're hurt, you're hurt. If you're sad, you're sad. That's where you are, and we need to begin from that point. And we don't ever want to ever make people believe that we're having this Pollyanna kind of attitude that if you're depressed, you just think your way out of it. What we do want to invite people to do is to be aware of the fact that by changing their way of thinking, they can indeed change the way that they view life.
Yes, and I've seen it happen so often where people are inspired by others. Just this week, I saw a lady go past a gentleman who was sitting on a bench down in Belmont Shore, and so she said something pleasant to him, and then when she came back out of the store, she looked at him in a pleasant way, and he said, "Lady, you have a beautiful soul." And that was very inspiring to hear, because that man was obviously lifted by the woman's demeanor. And just, who knows what was going through his mind and what his problems might have been. Mm-hmm. He looked as if he might have had problems in his life. But just to be lifted like that, and I know I've been lifted many times by others, and I'm sure you have too. And it's a wonderful thing. And that's part of the thought patterns that we form, that our thoughts are changed by just being around someone who's positive. So we can all do our part in life to help others just by being pleasant and outgoing.
We can, and by supporting them, and by affirming them and their importance to us in life, yes, their value to us in life, their appearance in life. If we just build our thought process, thought by thought, on positive, mm-hmm, positive things, mm-hmm, then when the negative things come, and they will, yeah, and we need to understand that, just as you said at the top of the program, Iris Freelander and Mike Costello have had as many problems as anyone else. So just because we have the ability to muster the positive thoughts that we need and to demonstrate those in our lives doesn't mean at all that we're going to avoid difficulties. The opposite is true. What it means is that we are going to be more empowered and more strengthened to deal with our own difficulties and challenges, mm-hmm, and we're going to be empowered to share these techniques with others so that they can deal with their life challenges. Life is not at all about avoiding difficulty, pain, or suffering. Life is about experiencing everything that there is to experience, the happiness and the sadness, the mountaintop experiences and the valleys. And life is really made richer because of those experiences. But the way that we live them out in our minds determines the quality of our life and the impact that they have upon us.
Exactly, and just a small thing, small relatively, as that we have, if we have too much rain, then people complain about it, and they forget that there's times when we complain because there's no rain. But this is, it's complaining about things that there's no reason to complain about. That takes a lot of energy, because we know that everything is energy, and we have so many units of energy, we might put it that way, and we can use that energy any different ways. So if we use the energy in a very negative way, then we've lost that much good in our lives.
We have. And our thoughts create energy, and our thoughts create vibrations. Our thoughts create the quality of our life. And we've been sharing with you this concept and idea that we live in our minds and not in the world. So the way that you think about your life, the way that you think about the challenges that you face, will determine the quality of your life and the quality of your life experience. We hope you found this information to be useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Mike and Iris would like to extend a cordial invitation for you to join them this Sunday morning at 11 a.m. for our weekly celebration service at the beautiful Seaport Marina Hotel at the corner of Pacific Coast Highway and 2nd Street, adjacent to the Marina Pacifica and Marketplace shopping centers. There will be a guided meditation, prayers, spirited music, and a dynamic, life-changing new thought message. Please join us this Sunday. You will be warmly welcomed into the company of like-minded, positive, and uplifting people. And remember, whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can attain it through confident living.